Eccomi qua, stavo ascoltando. So we speak in English or in Italian, as you prefer?
It's up to you. We're going to have some followers, some international followers. So if you want to,
better we speak in English.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This allows me to solve a doubt that I had previously. If I had to address you in an honorary term, or if I could give you del tu, as we say in Italian, since we have been knowing each other for many years now. Although Roberto,
sure, you have to use our tu because we know each other for many time, but also because I generally use it with everyone, so no problem.
Perfect. So, for everybody, Roberto Rampi is a senator of the Italian state, and is also representative for Italy at the Council of Europe. And in the Council of Europe Assembly Parliament, he takes care and follows everything that is related to culture, as he has always done since
many years.
Yes. So, Roberto, I really would like, first of all, how are you?
I'm fine, unfortunately.
Perfect. Are you going back and forth to Roma?
Yes, just a bit less than in the past, but yes, we have our work in Rome, and so we are trying not to move if it's possible, but for many kind of reason, the parliamentary works have to be in presence, and so we have also to go there. Tomorrow morning I will go there.
So thank you also for these commitments that characterize everything that you do. And so that's
Thank you.
So, Roberto, I would like to focus on Italy, though, because we have spoken with international representatives of other museums, and they have told us how museums are coping in this situation, which are their problems up to now, and which are their expectation and inspirations for the future. What do you think about Italian museum? How will it be the restart? From a political point of view, you can tell us that the government, the state, the ministry can help you or cannot help you. Sorry if I do it this direct, straight question, yes, but no. I think that it's important to know.
It's really correct, and as you know, I really believe that the museum is one of most important not only place, but generally space, place, and instruments, and many other things. I believe in museum, in a modern museum, in a contemporary museum, you can put together everything about culture. So the exposition, okay, but everything about kites, everything about theater, music, events, and so many things. So in that idea of museum, that is not, so diffuse in Italy, in that idea of museum is more difficult to work in a COVID situation, in a pandemic situation, and also to reopen. So the point is, okay, it's quite easy to have our museum reopen, hold idea of museum, a place of exposition when people go around from a room to another one. It's quite easy, you can take distance, you can open the museum only for not so many people, and many museums had not that problem because unfortunately many museums had not so many people that goes in the same moment. And you remember also that here in Lombardia, at the start of all that problem, one of the moment when we try to reopen something, we exactly reopen the museum with a very paid many attention. I have many friends of mine that have been in the museum the last week before the lockdown, because many museum of Milan reopened in that kind of strange situation. The point is that we believe, and when I say we believe, we mean you, but for example, all the work of the European Museum Forum. And I was supposed to be in Cardiff to work about that.
With us, we were supposed to be together there.
Yes, and that one of the problem we had with COVID. The point is exactly that we need, in Italy in particular, to press to have more and more and more museums that are not that kind of place, so boring place. Let me tell what I really believe. And the point is that that kind of situation can stress the idea of that kind of museum, that kind of very, very a place without relation between people. So I believe the point is, yes, sure, museum will be helped from the ministry and also the law and the political, the state and everything. I spoke also with the ministry and with the people who work with him, and I know they paid really a lot of attention about museums. So I'm sure of that. I don't have doubt about that. The point is which kind of museum. So I believe that, like in other cultural activities, and I'm working about that with quite difficult because it's not easy for music, for example. For we are going toward the summer, and in summer generally you have a lot of rock appointment and concert like that, and it's very, very difficult to believe how to do that this summer, and we all believe would be not possible this summer. People who work in theater, I know a lot of them, I'm working with a lot of them, and the idea of theater in that kind of situation is very, very difficult, because it's one of the places more difficult to open. But also, for example, pub and situation like music place, informal music place like pub and something like that, with live music, live club, that are very, very nice places for culture, so important. And they are places that you can work in a pandemic situation. And I believe that is already a problem of our idea of museum. So I believe we have to suppose, we are trying to understand also as a Council of Europe how to work in distance and how to have a cultural committee in distance. And when I will succeed in having a cultural committee in distance, I believe we have also to speak about European Museum Forum in distance.
Yes.
To reflect about that situation, in which way we can work in a new idea of museum that don't lose their function of a relation place.
Yes. Absolutely. This was another of the points I wanted to ask you about, because in these days, also because we have started using a lot of medical and scientific terms, we talk about connections with actually connection, collaboration, and all these things. I think that in the future, museums must open themselves to collaborate much more, even with the other in cultural institutions, and to be more open in the internationalization of the culture, let's say. How do you see that? Can it be also used for cultural diplomacy? I mean, can museums have a role in the cultural diplomacy from now on?
Yes, I believe that is very, very important. And as you know, for example, last time we met together in Sarajevo, we was in that very, very interesting work about the European Museum Forum, about the historical museum, and particularly that museum that work about a very, very difficult historical period that can be read in different way from one or another party. For example, you remember that Museum of Finland that worked about the modern history of Finland, and that period that was supposed to be Philo-Russia transition or ultra-nationalistic transition, and the civil war inside Finland about that, and how can a museum told to people about that period in a very objective way with so different kind of vision about one and the other one. I believe that is exactly the most interesting rules of museum, because is exactly in that situation that a museum can explain people that history, like everything, is not an objective situation. It depends from the point of view, and so it's a very democratic institution that gives people the different way to read the one or the other events and to understand themselves how to find their own and their personally way to read that events. So I believe that in that kind of way, also the museum had a very, very, very important diplomatic function. And nowadays, if we believe of a very open idea of Europe, the one, for example, of Council of Europe, that is a great European cultural idea, 47 different countries, not the European Union Europe, but one with also Russia, with also Turkey and many other places. The museum is exactly the place when we can find the different situation and different cultural link between each other. For example, I believe it's something I believe very strongly, that we had a very strong cultural relationship between Italy and Turkey that many people don't know, and a museum can teach about that. I believe that, for example, one people that we know very well each other, our friend that work at the museum of my town, Vimercate, is looking at us. And when we opened it 10 years ago, exactly, our little museum, in the first room of our museum, we teach people how our history and our origins mixed with people that came from the east of Europe, with people that came from the other side of Mediterranean. So this is a very important function, democratic and diplomatic function of museum.
Yes, but don't you see a discrepancy between the fact that nowadays everything is technology and online communication, while museums, for their nature, are physical spaces? How can we overcome that?
Yes, I know. I believe, and we look also many very interesting solution about that. For example, the museum who wins the European Museum Forum Premium was the Communication Museum in Switzerland.
Yes.
And that museum is exactly about communication and also about social media and the impact of social media in our lives. So it's a place where you speak about being in other virtual places. So I believe that museum, in a modern idea of museum, is exactly a place when you mix the presence in reality and the presence when you meet really different people, and maybe also a place when you can meet using the online technologies. And maybe it's also a place when you can understand better what you can find on the internet, for example, and to understand also some mistakes, some fake news. So also in that idea, a democratic function. I was supposed to work already in that days in the cultural committee about the right to know. And we are discussing that idea that I proposed to cultural committee about the right to know and rule of law and right to know. And in that work that I will do with some problem more about that situation, I will use also the idea of museum as a place for right to know, because the right to know is not only information, it is give people the instruments to understand. And I believe the real function of museum is giving people the instruments to understand from the past to the future.
Yes, absolutely, and I thank you for this statement that you are doing, because I do believe that it's very important that the people in the government everywhere, in Italy, all over the world, might have always in mind culture and museums, which are not rusty, old, spooky places, but as you said, they can be very lively and very up to date, and they have a role. But for doing that, in Italy, for instance, they need a lot of support, and they need a lot of support also to update their technologies and their infrastructure. Do you think that the government can consider this possibility to improve and to finance or support the update of the museum in an infrastructural way?
Yes, I believe that, and I also believe that that pandemic situation can also be an opportunity about that, because probably we will work about the museum and understand how to let the museum a place more safe for pandemic situation, but also maybe someone that came in future, because we have to understand that is probably that in a global situation like us, like the one we are living in, is so normal that sometimes something became a pandemic crisis. So we have to work to defend each other about that situation. And that could be also an opportunity to work on the structure of museum to make some changement, and the changement could be also something that go in that direction. I want to be honest, and you know what I'm going to tell you. Not many politicians believe about that. There is not a very, very big discussion about that. And museum, like library, like theater, are sometimes, and I believe many times, plays that, first of all, are not in the centrum of political debate. And when you speak about that in political debate, many times people, and I believe, first of all, people, and so also politicians, because politicians generally do what people believe they have to do, don't believe are a priority, and add a very old idea of place like library, like museum, and like theater. So I believe we need all together to work about a new and young and modern and also very innovating idea of theater, library, and museum, and maybe about a very strong mix of that three so important places that are the center of our culture, because our culture that came from the old Greece at the center exactly in library, museum, and theater, that are the exactly the places where we start to meet to become what exactly we are. And I insist with this use of the word democracy, because democracy is something that goes on the feet of information, on the feet of politics, but that works from museum, from library, and from theater. I really believe that.
Yes, we have a question, and the question from the followers.
Okay.
And the question is, in Italy we have a great number of small museums. How will they recover from this situation? Will I don't remember. I don't understand very well because it's in English. But will they strengthen their relationship with their local community more? I mean, they will have a way to be more connected with their territory, their local community, or do you think that the small museums will be left to themselves?
No, I believe, and I also know, I don't only believe, that we will have some help for many of that museum. I believe we need also to have more help also from regional government about that museum. So we have to work about let more understand the priority of giving also help to little museums from the regional government. Okay. And I believe that, okay, that one is exactly one opportunity. And I believe it's more, maybe the small museum had more problem with the budget, okay, but could be easier for them to work in a new era because they can change more easily than the big museum that had many more problems to change themselves.
Yes,
I really believe. I believe a lot. I believe a lot in a small museum. But they have to work together. They can't be alone. Small museum can be very strong and very useful if they work together. And if that the people can go from one to another one and have a regional idea of the proposal of the museum.
Yes, that's a very good idea, and I thank you for having said that, because of course you will know about the glocal.
Yes, sure. I believe that.
Yes, and of course, maybe in the next days, in the next months, we cannot go local, but we can go local. So we've got to find a new dimension where the little can fit on a national level. And that's very important what you said, that everyone, big and small museum, must work together with the other also cultural institution to give voice, to be advocate of what they are their needs, because otherwise it's true. Sometimes we fragmented our voices, we fragmented our actions as all these submissions, petitions that have been going on. The last question, what do you think about the idea of the cultural bonds that Battista, Fuentes and other people have hinted to?
Yes, I believe it's a good idea. I believe we have to work about that, because that community and local community, but also national community. And you know also that, because we spoke a lot about that. I believe that when you ask people to support the culture and to support their museum, or, for example, some kind of very important place, I believe in the strongness of culture to involve people, and also to move also the economical way and participation of people. So it's a good idea if we will ask people to spend, or not spend, but to give some money for a period to help culture. I believe many people can answer, yes, I will do that, and maybe they prefer to use their money in that way than in many other one. So it's a good idea. The point is that now we need really to use that situation to understand better how to spend also money, because we need more. I have no problem to say that we need more money in culture, but we also need to understand how to spend in a very good way money in culture, because many times we don't use it in the best way we can do that. I want to be honest, because I believe this is one of the problems.
So the three last question, I do it differently for you.
Yes.
The first one is not a book, but it's how, if you were the director of a museum, how would you spend the money in a better way?
That's a good idea. And you know, I'd like to be a director of museum before, or maybe in the future. So I'd like to do that. When exactly in that moment when we were speaking, I had an idea. If I will be a director of a small museum in next month, I will spend some money, few money, to connect with other small museums around the world. And because many people maybe in next month would love to go around the world, but would not possible to do that, I will offer them to go around the world from our little museum through other little museum around the world. I believe that could be a very interesting and creative idea to go around the world, to be local in a technological way.
Another way. So thank you. And the other two questions is, which is your favorite museum all over the world? And which is, if you know, a virtual museums that you want to suggest us to visit during these days?
They are very, very difficult questions, because every time you choose, I'm not so able to choose. And the first answer is a very stupid answer, I tell you, but I can't not don't answer the British Museum, because I really love British Museum. I know that there are a lot of different and little and wonderful museums all around the world. I visit a lot of them, but my heart is every time. I'd like to be in the British Museum in every time of my life, also for 5 minutes. because I believe it's exactly a place that is exactly the context of a wonderful situation. I know no one can be the British Museum, but I believe also a small museum can be in the atmosphere of British Museum. About technological museum, I look at a lot of them. I'm thinking about, okay, yes, there is one of the last I saw, because I can answer with many of them. The Science Museum of Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember now in that moment the name. I believe it's Nemo, maybe, yes. The Science Museum of Amsterdam, that is in the harbor of Amsterdam, and a very, very interesting way to teach science, also with technological instruments, and I like to suggest them. I know there is something that you can find also in the website of the museum. Yes.
Okay, Roberto, thank you very much for your time.